My name is Nikki Marín Baena, and I'm co-director at Siembra NC, where I work with Hector and Kelly and lots of other people. And we're so excited to have you on this call. So thank you so much for joining us. I am going to share some slides to help us get into it. So here we go. Can you all see my slides?
Yes.
Thank you. So welcome to this call. We are from Siembra NC and we are presenting Defend and Recruit. And so we wanted to share some of our learnings from the first Trump administration about how we organized during this time, because we think these learnings are now relevant. If you have questions, we will have time for questions at the end, but also feel free to use the Q&A. We have people here who are going to be helping us with some of the questions and answers. As we're getting started, today's workshop is how we use Trump's threats to recruit more people and defend our communities. And so today we're going to be doing some storytelling about that. And while we're settling in, I have a poll that I'll put in the chat in a little bit, but some of you have already done this, but feel free to grab some water or something to drink and tell us in the chat where you're calling in from. Give me just a second. Okay, and then let's see. We're seeing lots of North Carolina people in the chat. So we love to see it. We love Durham, Raleigh, Asheville, hello. And seeing people from other places, Madison, Wisconsin, seeing Oklahoma City, Boston, Organización de Mujeres Latinas Migrantes in DC, Maryland, Virginia, Columbia, South Carolina, Jackson, Mississippi. This is what we were hoping and what we knew. What we knew was that there were people all over the country who wanted to come out and find ways to defend immigrant communities and use that as a way to organize. And so I think that that is why we're here and we're so excited to see it. So thank you for joining us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about who this call is for. So it is for Latinos who want to organize their communities, and it's also for people who are not Latinos, but who want to organize and build a base while running a defense play. That's what we call it. And so basically for people who know that you want to do community defense, but also know that you can use community defense as a way to do base building organizing. So that is who this call is for, whether you're Latino or not Latino. If you want to do base building organizing and do community defense, that is who this call is for. Who this call is not for is people who want to learn immigration law. And that's not because we don't think immigration law is important. We think it's very important, but we are not lawyers. And so we will talk more about that, but we are not the best people to ask about really specific rights in really specific situations. We have beloved immigration lawyers that we can refer people to, particularly here in North Carolina, but that is not our lane, and we respect it. So, who this call is for, who this call is not for. What we won't do or answer on this call. This is not secure. Correct. Only organizing can create real safety. That's what we believe. And so we use communications channels that support organizing. And so you will hear us refer at different times to using Zoom. You will hear us refer to using WhatsApp. We do not always use those. We sometimes use more secure channels like Signal, but I think in general, we believe that real safety comes through the product of organizing. On this call, we also won't be doing, did someone get detained in X part of the country? We won't be answering questions about that. We can't. And questions like, what about this thing with my family member? Like I said, we are not attorneys and we can't provide that kind of information. Particularly if you are in North Carolina, we can refer you to great immigration attorneys, and we do know some in other parts of the country. But those are not things that we aren't going to focus on, and we definitely won't be focusing on them in this call. So, just to get us started, before other things that you can expect today. Today, I'm gonna start a little bit with what we're seeing in the field right now and what we're seeing in the context of patterns around immigration enforcement. And then I will tell you a little bit about Siembra and about the time period between 2017 and 2020 and what we think that means about this time period that we're in. So we'll start with a little bit of what we're seeing right now. Then we'll talk about what we did to organize people and what we think that that means for this moment. And then we'll have some different opportunities for you all to join us for future trainings and take other actions. Okay. So right now, recently, we are not winning the battle of the story. There are lots of headlines about detentions and the headlines that we're seeing are not outnumbering the Trump is going after criminals propaganda. And so I think we feel a little bit like this is one of the issues that we're seeing, not just in North Carolina, but across the country. We think that there is widespread support for the idea of mass deportation when people, what they think is happening is that it's criminals that are getting detained and deported. And so the stories about just regular people going about their everyday lives and minding their business, getting detained, or asylum seekers getting detained, or people going to work or waiting outside of their church, those stories are not yet outnumbering the kind of idea that it's mostly criminals. And so that's part of what we see as being true right now. Other gaps that we see are around casework. And so we will talk about casework. And so for people who have done this kind of organizing before, you know what this means. But for people who haven't heard that term before, in immigration organizing, when we talk about casework, we're talking about working with families who have detention happening in their family to support them. And there are reasons that we think that casework is really important. So one is because it's important to amplify stories, like I just said, of individuals who have been detained so that we can put more human faces on the fact that this is happening and that these people are being permanently banished from our communities. Another thing is sharing real-time information about ICE arrests to combat any kind of misinformation about who's being targeted, how often warrants are being used, how often is the Fourth Amendment being violated. We think that something really important that we'll talk more about too is just how many rumors are out there right now. And so doing casework puts us in contact with more real people, and that helps us know what are real detentions versus what are just rumors about detentions. Another thing that we think is important is sharing information about people who are being detained using tactics like deported using tactics like expedited removal. And then the other gap that we see that we at Siembra are always trying to fill is just the gap of base building. And so we think if there was more base building happening in communities across the country, we would see more immigrants, more Latinos demanding dignity. And so that's why we're so happy so many of you are here, because we know that some of you are already trying to do base building work or want to do base building work. And we definitely think that this is an all hands on deck base building moment. So in the last 3 weeks since the inauguration in North Carolina, most of the ICE arrests that we are seeing are still jail arrests, so what are called custodial arrests. So that is where we are still seeing most of the detentions happen. We draw a distinction between these types of detentions and then detentions that are community arrests, where ICE is going out directly into the community and detaining people or doing workplace raids, things like that. We're still seeing mostly arrests from the jails, which is what we saw also during the Biden administration. We believe that there are local campaigns that can slow those. And so these are headlines that we've seen just in the last few weeks have been about people who could be facing deportation after traffic stops or during misdemeanor hearings. And so one of the things that we want to talk to you all about is the possibility for cite and release campaigns. Cite and release means that people are let off with a citation for minor misdemeanors, and so they don't have to be booked at the jail. As we all know, most ICE detentions happen from the jails, so keeping people from being booked at the jail keeps them from ending up in ICE custody for minor offenses. In this moment, ICE has a monopoly on information. And what we mean when we say that is that the way that we get information about how many people have been detained is often because ICE said it, which is why we think it's really important to collect our own information. And one of the ways that we do that at Siembra is through our hotline. And so we can tell you how many calls we got in the last 3 weeks, which is just over 1,000. And of those calls, I think 3 of them were about actual ICE detentions. And all of those were what we would call typical detentions. So where it was either at a probation appointment, at a court hearing, something like that. And so that's what we're hearing at Siembra, but we think it's really important for all of us to be collecting our own information about real detentions that are happening in our communities. Also, so we can analyze patterns of those detentions and learn what tactics are being used to detain people. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what else we're seeing. So we've seen people get detained who are asylum seekers, people who are under supervision, so who have some kind of monitoring system. And we're seeing people get detained who have criminal records. We're also seeing enforcement tactics that are community arrests in Democratic-run cities and states, what are called casually blue states or blue cities. So we've been seeing reports in the news about community arrests in those places. And when we say community arrests, again, what we mean is ICE agents going out into a community and directly detaining people, as opposed to picking people up from jails. We've seen some small scale workplace enforcement, and we've seen jail detentions, which is what we see the most of. And it's hard for us to monitor those. So that's the thing that we're trying to figure out. Things that we think might be increasing are courthouse arrests and arrests in semi-public areas. This is just based on the reports that we're hearing from other parts of the country. These are not things that we are yet seeing in North Carolina, so we have questions about them. And then the things that we have not seen increase are enforcement actions at schools, churches, hospitals, or protests. There was a lot in the news. There has been a lot in the news about these places that no longer have protected status under this administration, but we have not seen that yield more enforcement action yet. We have not yet seen a lot of community arrests in Republican or red-run states or cities. And I don't know about you all, but at Siembra, we've gotten a lot of calls about preparing for enforcement at schools, particularly because of the enforcement, because of the protected status being lifted from schools. But it's not actually a thing that we are seeing happen. And so we're not sure yet if we should consider this a real threat. We are taking some steps around it, but it's just a thing we wanted you to know. Some people think that there's maybe too much attention going into preparing for enforcement at schools as opposed to enforcement just outside the school or just at someone's workplace. And so that's something that we are going to be keeping an eye on. We're seeing some new tactics. And so since the inauguration, and this is what we're tracking so far. So new legal tactics that we've seen. We've been reading reports about people who were detained and then deported within 24 hours who have been here for more than 2 years. So basically expedited removal being used in cases where we did not assume that expedited removal would apply. And then deportation without an immigration court hearing for people like asylum seekers, and transfer to unusual detention centers, such as the use of Guantanamo as a place to detain immigrants. So those are new things that we're seeing that are different from what we had seen in the 2017 to 2020 period. We're also seeing some different enforcement tactics, or at least these are things that we're reading reports about. These are not things we've seen directly in North Carolina yet, but these are things we've seen in other parts of the country and read reports about. So one is not presenting warrants during workplace enforcement actions. And so we've read reports about those in Memphis, Philly, Wilton Manors, Newark. We've seen multi-agency collaboration, so with the Department of Justice, DEA, ATF, using at least one criminal warrant in a larger operation, we've seen in a few places. And then finally, we've seen use of military-style vehicles and flashbangs. I think I saw a video from Arizona about this, but these are things that we've been seeing used as part of immigration enforcement activities. So these things are new. These are not things that we had tracked a lot of during the last administrations, or they feel new to us. So wanted to that's kind of our assessment of what's happened in the last 3 weeks. I think that the other thing I would add is that at Siembra we have a hotline, and as I said, we'll talk more about the hotline, but so many rumors, so many more than we remember from the period from 2017 to 2020, but just lots of people um, reporting in things that they saw on Facebook, things that they saw on WhatsApp. Um, so, yeah. So with that, all that said, we do feel like we launched this playbook and these trainings because we did think that there were lessons from the period from 2017 to 2020 and the organizing that we did that were worth sharing out in the world and that might be helpful for people who are trying to do community defense work in different places. And so I'm going to go into beginnings of Siembra and how we got started. Um, but let me maybe take a second and look at what's happening in the chat. Feeling nosy. And I think for people who are wondering, we will be sending out we will be sending out the slides and we will be sending out this recording of the presentation to the people who registered. So you will get all of this material from us. Okay, mostly it's people saying hi, that's great. So Siembra had started in 2017, and in the beginning, uh, we were volunteers with clipboards. So this is a very old photo, but this is from 2017. And in the beginning, we were going out into neighborhoods and we were just handing out Know Your Rights information. And we had been seeing that there were lots of rumors, and so we were helping people in neighborhoods start WhatsApp groups so that they could, one of the things that we think happens as a result of this kind of enforcement activity is that people get more isolated. So people oftentimes in neighborhoods will say, I just go from work to home, from home to work, from school to home, from home to school. We would hear that a lot. And so helping people know who their neighbors are and be able to talk to their neighbors felt like a really important first intervention. And so we were helping people start WhatsApp groups in their neighborhoods, um, so that if anyone thought that there was a vehicle, for example, that might be suspected ICE presence, they could text each other and be like, does anybody know whose car that is? So that was a lot of what we were doing when we first got started. And I'm still in some of these WhatsApp groups from like 2018, and they're great. Like they don't just get used for ICE presence, they also get used for people being like, does anyone know whose dog that is? And so I think one of the things that you'll hear me talk about a lot is that it's not really just about how we verify ICE presence, but it's also about how we help foster connection to get the bigger wins moving forward. And so I think that this is actually really important for beginning to lay the groundwork for that. And like I said, rumor control. This was really important. We would hear stories about people staying home from work, keeping their kids home from school. And one of our big goals was for people to be able to live as dignified a life as possible, even with everything else that's going on. And so it felt really important to be able to help people tell the difference between just rumors that are all over the place or, okay, no, this is real enforcement activity. And here are some more pictures where we started a hotline. The first hotline that we had was a free Google Voice phone number. And so we would go out, knock doors in different neighborhoods, tell people about the phone number, and we would help them when there was information to give out, we would give it out. And then we would also use social media like Facebook, Instagram to confirm detentions. And so even when there were detentions, we were always trying to help people like know what to be afraid of and know what not to panic about. Um, and so those were some of the things that we did in the really early days. And then we also thought it was really important to rally around the people who were actually experiencing detentions in our community. Oftentimes there was a feeling of the phrase in Spanish that would get used was el que nada debe, nada teme. If you don't owe anything, you shouldn't fear anything. And so this was a way that people would kind of start to stigmatize people who might have had a criminal past. And it was a way that sometimes we felt like people were saying like, well, people deserve this. And for us, we feel like if people committed a crime, then we have like a justice system for that. But to say, people go to court and they pay their fines and they go to probation and they do all this stuff and then they still get detained anyway and then permanently banished from our communities felt uh, cruel. And so we really wanted to help families who were experiencing these detentions destigmatize that someone in their family had been detained and get them social support. And oftentimes, basically 99% of the detentions, just to not say 100%, but 99% of the detentions that I've experienced were of the primary wage earner in a family. And so there's not just the devastation of this person has been detained. There's also severe economic impact. And so um, helping build community support around a family could mean we're helping them connect to a lawyer to help with their immigration case. But it could also mean that we were um, helping raise money for legal expenses or for bills that people had to pay. And one of the things that really surprised us was how many people were willing to come out of the woodwork to help raise money or pay for legal fees or support rallies for people they didn't know at all. And so that was one of the ways that we organized. And we also tried to find campaigns that would keep our people safer. And so these are pictures. The one on the left is from Alamance County, and the one on the right is from Forsyth County here in North Carolina. And the one on the left was at a time when the Alamance County was considering bringing back their 287G program. And the one on the right is when we were asking Sheriff Bobby Kimbrough from Forsyth to stop honoring ICE detainers for immigration violations. And so um, I also think that it's good to see the photos because I think one of the things that's really important is that we really tried to portray different kinds of characters in these stories. So like children who would be impacted because oftentimes the way that these stories are getting portrayed in the news doesn't really show the full impact of a detention on a community. And so bringing kids in to talk about how this would impact them, to not have to be afraid of someone in their family getting detained, just kind of complicated the story in ways that we thought were really important. And I think the other thing is these were both kind of county level things. And here in North Carolina, even if a city is relatively progressive, oftentimes our counties are not as progressive because they include rural areas in addition to the city. And so trying to find messaging that would work on the county level where people were less progressive was also a thing that we were trying to do. This is another campaign we found. This was during like a big ICE operation in North Carolina. Holiday Inn Express ICE was using them kind of as they were staying there, and they were using it as a place where they were staging their operation from. And so we organized a lot of people to ask the Holiday Inn Express to not collaborate with that. And so these were different opportunities that we were finding, not just to do kind of the support work around families, but also to find little campaigns, little fights that we could win that would help make our people safer, even past the moment where ICE is conducting an operation in North Carolina. And the way the detentions worked last time around in North Carolina is that ICE would come and do like a big 10-day sprint of big detentions. And so in those moments, a lot of people were panicking and they were also interested in doing something. And so we saw it as being part of our responsibility to come in and get people organized. And so these are some pictures of, okay, there were a bunch of people detained, so let's have a press conference and let's have an opportunity for people to come out and talk about how they're feeling about this and get organized. And here's a couple more pictures that are similar from this one on the right is there had been a detention in Winston-Salem. And so people would call us and say, wait, I want to know what rights I have, or can you all come do a Know Your Rights workshop in my neighborhood? And we would say, we'll help you put on a Know Your Rights workshop in your neighborhood. And so this was another way that we use these opportunities to help people get more organized by having them host workshops in their communities. And then we would use the momentum from doing those small sprints to pivot to bigger fights. And so this picture here is from 2019 from HB 370. So this was when in 2019, the North Carolina State Legislature was trying to pass a forced ICE cooperation bill for the sheriffs. And we also did our biggest mobilization of Latino and immigrant people to rally to the Capitol. So I think it was like 400 or more people in Raleigh to ask at the time Governor Roy Cooper to veto HB 370, which he did. And so I think that this was a way that we kind of used a lot of the momentum that we had built throughout the time of a lot of detentions happening to invite people into a bigger fight. And so those are some stories about ways that we used a time that could have just been characterized by a lot of fear, and there was a lot of fear, which was understandable, to help people know what exactly to be afraid of. We didn't deny that there's nothing to be afraid of. We didn't do that. But we met them in the place of their fear and then invited them into taking risks to take on bigger fights to protect our community in a longer term way. And so that is really the spirit of Defend and Recruit that we're trying to invite all of you into, is how do we meet this moment, but also invite people into longer and bigger fights that'll keep us safer. And so talking about that, just wanted to sum up some things that we learned from that time. One, fear keeps people from organizing. And so when we meet people only in the fear place and stay there, it becomes very difficult to organize them. And this photo here is from one of our first experiments, which was in an apartment complex in Greensboro where we were doing, I see Hector smiling. Hector might have had to canvas at this apartment complex. We knocked doors in this apartment complex and put together power of attorney clinics. And the power of attorney clinics were a thing that people really wanted. People were really like, what's going to happen with my stuff if I get detained? What's going to happen with, so what our reflection was after this was that this didn't work because we met people in their fear place and then did not invite them to leave their fear place. And so this was one of those things where we think that this is an important 2025 lesson. And we're seeing a lot of that tendency in organizers these days of really wanting to meet people in the fear place and then kind of stay there. And so my kind of provocation is how do we meet them there and then invite them into something that makes us all more powerful in the long term? Next, help people to learn to assess threats and to reduce fear to earn their trust. And so this is a photo of something that we used to do a lot of and may have to do a lot of again, which is reporting false alarms. And so if there were rumors that were really pervasive, that were getting a lot of reports on our hotline, we wouldn't just tell people like, no, that's not a verified thing, or like we would actually put out a post and say, we did confirm, this one was like, we confirmed that some law enforcement activity was happening, but it was not ICE activity. And lots of the rumors that we've gotten in the last 3 weeks have been stuff like this, where it's like, there's an undercover cop at the Zaxby's. That's not ICE. And so one thing is learning people, like helping people learn how to assess real threats. And then also, when we do that reliably, we build trust with people. And that's really important to us. If you are an organizer or have been an organizer, you know your relationships and your trust that you build with people are everything. The other part of this, I think, is like we are in a high misinformation moment. And so helping people sift through what is real information and what is misinformation is really important beyond each individual ICE rumor. It's a thing that we're helping our community do for each other. And one of the things that I've loved seeing in the last, especially in the last week, I've seen more Facebook posts where people are sharing rumors and then someone comments like, but is that verified? Who verified this? Who saw it with their own eyes? And so I'm seeing more of our community take that responsibility to protect each other by kind of questioning what is real good information and what isn't. And I think we all have a role to play in this. I know people want to help a lot by sharing whatever they heard, but actually helping people look at information critically and be like, how do I know this is real? Is a way that we can keep each other safe and keep each other living better lives. Another thing we learned is that casework helps build trust and recruit, but it's not an end in itself. And so I think that there were times that I think this has become at different times in the immigrants' rights movement kind of a tendency of like doing a lot of deportation defense and individual casework, which we think is vital. Like I said earlier, it's really important to be able to tell those stories because otherwise the overwhelming narrative is that the people getting detained are criminals. They deserve to be detained. And so for us to do our work of like being in connection with families, supporting those families, especially in this really difficult moment that they're going through, and being able to tell those stories so that we know the truth, which is that this is happening to people, this is happening to all kinds of people, is really important. But I think that one of the things that we've really tried to focus on is like, how can we bring in other people? So for example, if we're going to meet with someone who had a family member who got detained, is there someone else who lives near them who can also come help them walk through the process of what's about to happen in their life? So how can we like use these moments to actually build community connection, is a thing that's really important in our work. Especially at a time when I think the tendency of people is to want to hide out and to not talk to anybody about it, to be like, no, actually, there's all kinds of, you're not alone. That's one of the main things that we tell people who call us with a detention is like, you're not alone, and it's really important for us that you know that. One other thing we learned, don't think like a lawyer. And again, we love lawyers, and we respect the work that they do, and we are not them. And this is our Know Your Rights Jeopardy board, but so this is something that we use in our Know Your Rights trainings with people. And I see this with organizers a lot, and I've been talking to our organizers about it. In these moments where there's a lot of panic, I think that there can be a desire to answer every single question that everybody has in a community about what happens if my cousin gets detained, or what happens if you have an asylum case and you applied back in February, but also you just got this letter and you get stopped in a car, and should you give them? And so I think that there's a tendency to want to be able to answer all those questions. And one of the things that we've learned is that it is, or we can do our work more with a more clear head when we don't try to be lawyers because we're not them. And so, again, we keep a great list of referral lawyers in North Carolina. We recommend that you do that as part of your organizing process, is to meet the lawyers in your community and get a sense of which of them are reliable, which of them charge a lot of money and which of them don't charge a lot of money, which of them stay too busy. We do recommend that people do that. And keep a list of lawyers that you can refer people to for their individual stuff. Our job is to do enough know your rights that people know how to assess risks, uh, and hopefully live their lives. And so that's what we're trying to invite people into, is assess your risks enough that you feel like you have agency over your life, because agency is so key to what we're doing as organizers. One of the other lessons that we learned is to channel anger, not just fear. And this feels really important to us. The photos that you see here, one of them is Greensboro has a Martin Luther King Day parade every year, and we invited a lot of people to march in a Latines for Black Lives contingent of that. And then this other photo is of during that same Alamance County campaign where we were trying to stop the return of 287G. In Alamance County, Sheriff Terry Johnson was investigated by the Department of Justice and part of for racial profiling. And one of the things that he had been reported to say to his deputies was, "Go bring me some taco eaters." And so we did a taco delivery to his office, and we brought a lot of our friends with us and a mariachi band. And the slogan was, "If tacos is what, si tacos quieren, tacos les damos." If they want tacos, we'll bring them tacos. So we did a taco delivery there. And I tell that story because I think that sometimes when we get into this, like, no, we're in a fear moment, uh, we think that we have to stay in that vibe the whole time. And I think like the little moments that we found to channel people's anger and get it out were so powerful and helped people feel like, again, like they have agency, they have power, and then we could channel that power towards other things. And so I think it's important to notice what are the things that are coming up for people around us, um, and to channel them. So that was one. And so those are some of our key takeaways from the first Trump administration that we think they still apply in this time period. I think like one of the things that I have said a lot to my family and to the organizers is like, we cannot let this time period eat us alive. And so our people are often our greatest teachers on this, like a lot of the people in our community are like still going out dancing, they're still eating good food. And so like, how are we kind of meeting the fear and meeting the panic and meeting the concern, and also meeting the joy and meeting the outrage and meeting the ways that people are exigiendo dignidad, that people are demanding their dignity. And so I think that those are some of the things that have been lessons for me and lessons for us at Siembra, and that we wanted to share tonight with all of you. And so we shared a little bit about what we're seeing in the field, and some of those things might require us to adapt, but some of these lessons felt still pretty broadly applicable. We have some things coming soon that we wanted to tell you about. We're making outreach materials. So for people who want to be able to do work like Siembra's work in your community, we want to help you out. So we're making a Canva toolkit so that you can make uh, your own outreach materials. So these are examples of, I mentioned the Know Your Rights Jeopardy board, or we made little logos and uh, things that you can use in order to make flyers to use in your own community. Here's another example. And so we also have ideas for actions that you could take. So here's like an example of a flyer that you could use if you wanted to have a Bienvenidos patrol, for example, instead of a border patrol. to have a rally in your community. So we're going to be sending out links to that Canva toolkit soon. So that's something that's coming up. And then we have some more trainings. This is the first one that we're doing. Some people are asking about how to recognize ice vehicles and have an ice watch program. And so we added a special bonus workshop next week, which is how to build an ice watch training. And I'm gonna ask for you all to, does someone have the link to put in the form, to put the form in the chat? Oh, I have the link. I have the link. But yeah, and then we have a few more trainings set up for the next few weeks. So one on how we organized a neighborhood after a detention, another on how to start a solidarity fund, and one where you'll see Hector come back to tell us how workers can fight wage theft and ICE detentions, because that's his kind of area of expertise. So we have upcoming trainings. You can sign up and register for them at our website at defendandrecruit.org. And you can fill out the follow-up form to let us know if we should offer other trainings. And we're asking a lot of information about you because we want to connect you with each other. So we want you to be able to find other people in your community that are doing, that are also interested in doing defend and recruit work. And so we are sending out this form. Can someone put that link in the chat? And that one can help us know about where you are and what kind of work you're doing. And the reason that we're asking all these questions about that is so that you can get connected to other people in your community and do the thing. And so I'll stop sharing there and let's move into some questions and answers. And so, oh, I'm seeing the website is that one, I think. And so I had gotten some questions. Oh, but before I move into question and answers, I do want to say one more thing. So me, Kelly, and Hector work at kind of in-person Siembra. And so, but there are all these other people that I want to shout out, like Chris and Jeanette and Mindy, Miri, Lily, who are doing digital defend and recruit work. And so you're probably getting emails or text messages from them. They are supporting this project, and I want to shout out the incredible work they've been doing over the last few weeks to meet all of you and get them here. So I think just wanting to shout all of that out because I do not, as you might have known from how this is working, I barely know how to use a computer. So we are so thankful for this incredible digital team. So I wanted to move into Q&A. There are some questions that people have been pulling out. So one is about, can you explain more about moving people out of the fear place? And so, yeah, I think, look, it's no shade. But I know that there's a lot of people who, in moments like the one that we're in right now, really want to help people. And one of the ways that, like, I can think of examples that are like, oh, let's do grocery deliveries to immigrant communities so that they don't have to leave their homes. And that's like a kind thing to do. And it also kind of leaves people in the place of, yeah, you should be afraid. You shouldn't leave your house. It kind of accepts this narrative. And part of what we're trying to figure out is how do we validate both that this is a scary time and also try to minimize the panic so that people will want to leave their homes and people will want to fight for their dignity. What we see in times where there's a lot of ICE activity is that it's not just the danger of detentions, is that kids start getting bullied at school, workers start not getting paid and they don't want to complain about it. all of a sudden there's a bunch of housing discrimination that nobody wants to say anything about. And so it's not just that the ICE detentions create problems for people who get detained. It creates an environment where people don't feel like they have any right to fight for their dignity at all. And so what we're trying to do is validate the fear, minimize it, control it, and then at the same time, as much as we can, because it is there, and at the same time, help people know that if they do want to demand their rights at the workplace or at school or wherever, that we'll still be there with them and that they'll have a community behind them and that nobody's gonna go alone. And so that's a way to speak to that. How do we break through the blue city in a red state barrier on a local level when running into challenge? Yeah, yes. So I don't know. I live in Greensboro. I feel like Greensboro is a purple city in a purple state. But I think we do see it, we do see it here in North Carolina on some level. And I think that what we're trying to figure out is how to be creative about what are the issue campaigns that we can fight in different places. And so in some of the really rural places, we're trying to figure out how to have a goal around how many employers we talk to so that they know what rights they have and how to navigate whether they can let ICE into their workplace or not, that they know that they can ask for a warrant and things like that. In some of the places, we're trying to figure out what are ways that workers can definitely receive their wages after having a wage theft case and receiving a judgment in their favor. So those are some of the things that we're trying to figure out in places that might not be super progressive. Because it is a challenge. I think that in a place like North Carolina, preemption is a challenge. Yeah, and I'm seeing some of the stuff in the chat about people are the after Helene, people are worried about going to events hosted by city and county where information about resources is getting shared. This is exactly what we're talking about. And so this is what we're trying to do is invite people to like, okay, what are the measured risks that you can take if you're not alone? And so those are some of the things that we are always trying to talk about in our community. And any thoughts on more or effectively organizing Black and Latina community for the purpose of this work? One of the things that we've spent a lot of the last few years talking about at Siembra is what are the things that are impacting our community that are not immigration, and how do we like form relationships with other communities around those things? And particularly where we've seen a lot of that play out is around workplace stuff. And I think in our community, we see a lot of workplace abuses and wage theft, but we know that North Carolina is a terrible place to be a worker in general. Oxfam does a report every year, and North Carolina is the worst state to be a worker in the US. And so those are things that don't just impact immigrant workers. Immigrant workers are often kind of at the front line of mistreatment, but they're not the only people receiving poor wages, not getting benefits. I'm a mom, like maternity leave, parental leave, childcare, like these are things that are not available, and these are things that the state could provide that would make all of our lives as working people better. And so I think that there are opportunities to find those kinds of issues in our communities to fight for that where maybe the repression of ICE is part of the issue, but it's not the full thing. Are there other questions? I'm seeing one about rumor control. How do we train members to monitor community chats and discern information? We made a bunch of graphics. You can find them on our Instagram and Facebook page, but we did make a lot of graphics to help people like here are questions to ask yourself before you share a post about a rumor. And we have found those to be really effective. And now we see people that we don't even know posting those as comments uh, on different threads on Facebook. And so those are different things that we've made that are easy for people to share and get out there.
Another good one, Nikki, that comes up is, can you share more on how you recruited volunteers and built out infrastructure? Basically, like outside of these mass trainings, how do you build like the skills and the disciplines for folks to come through and like really be committed when they're responding?
Hmm. Yeah. So we back in 2018, 2019, we started doing Ice Watch trainings. And so at those trainings, we would help people kind of know what we were seeing in terms of ice detentions back in North Carolina back in those days. And so how you could spot ice activity, and then if you were spotting something that was possible ice activity, how you could approach that person. And because sometimes it's like it's just some person napping in a neighborhood in their car, and so how to approach that vehicle and get information that can help us ascertain whether or not it is actual ice presence. And so then when you do the training, you have a list of people who you can send, like, hey, we've seen possible activity. Can someone verify this? And then that's how we start to cultivate that list. And so it's a training and then it's relational. So, and a lot of our work is kind of like that. We'll do a Know Your Rights workshop in a neighborhood. We'll meet a lot of people, then we follow up with them. And then some of those people kind of, all they really want is to get text messages and get our updates. And some of them really want an opportunity to get involved.
Kind of related to that, there's a question about like how do we do these types of actions that kind of toe the line, but then have like the borders are saying like you're disrupting law enforcement or this is actually escaping, not no, knowing your rights. So like how do we know when those lines are being crossed?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is like the right to ask for a warrant with your name on it before letting someone into your house is like guaranteed to us by the Constitution. And so I don't think we should give that up while we don't have to. And so I think that um, I think that this administration is really going to call into question, like they're already doing this, right? They're calling into question whether we have rights that we currently do constitutionally have. But I think while we have them, we have them. And so I think that helping people know that they can ask for a warrant, that that warrant should be signed by a judge, that it should have your name on it before you let someone into your house. This is a basic right. And I think we don't train people to intervene in ICE activity. We're not trying to interrupt ICE detentions. So I think that it's important for me to say that. I think what we are trying to do is confirm or deny presence of ICE activity because 90% of the time it is a rumor and it's unnecessary panic.
Here's a juicy question, Nikki. Can you talk about some of the opportunities or effective approaches that we've done to actually build cross-racial responses to intense anti-immigrant? Like, what are ways that we have actually expanded some of the work into including multiracial work?
Yeah, I mean, at different opportunities in counties like Guilford, Forsyth, we've done work that was not just immigrants or Latinos, there was also like Black people from those communities, where we had multiple things that we wanted to meet with the sheriff about. And so I think one is that it was getting into the room together to prepare for those meetings was a really incredible experience of like people getting to share across language and across experiences. And then going together to the sheriffs with like a unified package of like, these are things that we want to ask for that we think would help our communities feel safer. That's an example of something that we did. Um, Trying to think if there's,
I think
yeah.
the only other example I think I would add there is también like we look for opportunities to collaborate with broader anti-policing work. So like one of the things that we're testing out right now as we're working around. I saw some folks in the chat talking about our Durham Ice Watch training, and it's like we're looking for opportunities to work with folks like Durham Beyond Policing and other folks that are actually calling like into question this mass incarceration question and just figuring out how to be good partners and moving forward and kind of being able to build a base that also is going to contribute to the larger ecosystem in our state.
I just thought of something funny. Okay, this is just like a funny story. I don't know. It's tangentially related, but it's a funny story. So for the last 2 years, we've done a lot of wage theft work. A lot of the wage theft work culminates in an action outside of the boss's house or outside of the place of business. We like always get the cops called on us. Always, always. And we think that this is like sad funny, like in the sense that the cops get called on us and not on the person who like stole $20,000 from a bunch of construction workers and is sitting inside their fancy house. And even when the cops get there and we explain what's going on, it's not like the cop is gonna go get the worker their money back. Like they want us to leave the private property. And so, but we did one in Durham and the what are they called, Kelly? The Heart people?
The HEART program, yeah.
Community responders came to like see what was going on. So it was like we were really excited about it. We are like a community win. The cops didn't come, the community responders did. But
It's
I think it's
community policing alternative community
yeah,
in Durham, and so it was a big deal that a community member actually got to come out and actually support us.
yeah, we were into it. So I think that there are these, and then people experience it differently. So it's like like the workers that we're marching with experience it differently. So yeah.
One big question that's coming up in different ways is how do we not like inundate the field or duplicate the work? How, especially right now in many different cities, maybe there's a bunch of different groups that are popping up and want to help and support. But there's some questions in the chat of like, how do we do that without overlapping or like doing all the same work and burning ourselves out? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that really made a big impression on us and that like inspired us to start Siembra in the first place was Marisa Franco, who's like the national director at Mi Gente, wrote an essay, I think it may be in early 2017, that it had like, if you see a gap, fill it. And we felt so clear about there is this gap of base building and we want to fill that gap. And that is why we're starting Siembra. And so I think that I think it is, we want to connect you with each other in your communities. This is part of why we're asking you so many questions about where you live. But part of the reason for that is that we don't think that there needs to be duplicative work. The other part of it is, I think it is great to get involved with like knowing what are the rapid response networks that already exist in your community? What are the immigrant organizations that already exist? What are the base building groups that already exist? So all of those things feel really important. And if there is a gap to fill it. And so I think that, and I hope that the gap that you choose to fill is the base building one, because I truly, truly believe that that is how we will win the big wins. And so that's my hope for all of you. Maybe one last question.
This might be a little bit larger, but there are some questions about like media and like Trump type of propaganda. Like, are there ways that individuals can push back on the messaging on the media level? I feel like this is going to be a big one for us this year of just like not sinking into the fear and also having messages that go beyond just reacting to Trump and reacting to what they're doing. So yeah, any ideas there on how we push back against the very big influence that media has.
Yeah, this is making me think. I know there's a lot of people from Asheville on this call, and I felt like right around the time of Helene, I fell for some Helene misinformation that was getting shared all over Facebook that was like, they're turning people around at the borders. They're not letting relief workers into Asheville. They're making all the volunteers turn around. And and we were trying to, there were a bunch of Siembra members who do like landscaping and construction work and who wanted to like go out with chainsaws and help people clear stuff out of their yards. And um, I had to start calling people in Asheville and be like, is this true? And they were like, that's not true. You know, like I just heard about someone who made the drive yesterday. That's not a thing that's happening. And I think that part of the reason that we talk about starting these WhatsApp groups and these community groups, there's a primary function, which is rumor control. But the other way that it works, and like, I think the other way we're going to counteract a lot of the big media and the TikTok scams and all of the weird stuff that's getting shared on Facebook, is by having places that are interpersonal relationships where people can check it out. And so, hey, I heard this thing. Did you hear this thing? Do we think this is for real? And so that is part of the, you know, part of what base building does. It's not just about the organizing and the lists and the numbers. It's also about creating these relationship containers where people can check out what each other is hearing. And yeah, I think we will still bring the joy. We can still bring the joy. We will still bring the joy. And I think that, yeah, finding ways to do that that people don't feel exposed because we are safe in numbers is really important. And we'll talk more about ways to do that in the next few weeks. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for joining us. We'll wrap it up for tonight. There's some forms. Yes, thank you, Hector, for putting all of those there. So there's some links for people who want to get involved. There is thank you to the digital team. Thank you to everyone who came. Thank you for the work you're doing in your communities. So really wonderful to see all of you, and I hope that we stay connected and hear more about what's going on. Have a good night, y'all.